Reading research papers is not a simple task, especially if you are not familiar with the domain, then it is going to be extremely difficult or messy. So as I created this small roadmap so that you can find your way when it comes to computer vision research and update yourself to explore the concepts, more deeper concepts like vision transformers and diffusion models. So I would suggest first start by reading this LeNet paper. So LeNet paper is the point where the Jan LeCun and his team popularized convolutional neural networks trained using stochastic gradient descent in order to detect and classify these handwritten digits from the MNIST dataset. And so this is a little bit dense paper, so it might take some time to understand and digest the concepts, because Jan LeCun is explaining from convolutions to how backpropagation is implemented using this chain rule and multivariate calculus. So take your time, it might take about a week. Still take your time and slowly read this paper. Then comes the next most important paper when it comes to modern computer vision. It is AlexNet. So during 2012, Fei Fei Li and her team created this very popular ImageNet dataset with millions of high resolution and correctly labeled data. So this created a level field for computer vision scientists across the globe to train their models and compare the results. So AlexNet was the first architecture to win this challenge, ImageNet classification challenge, and the main idea was use deeper convolutional neural networks and implement them on GPUs. Then, so one of the key ideas when it comes to AlexNet architecture is dropout. So you randomly drop neurons from your neural network in order to prevent the model from overfitting. So it is essentially a regularization technique. And by dropping these random neurons, you can think of the model as an ensemble of exponentially many neural networks. Then after you are familiar with dropout, then we can move into VGGNet. VGGNet is the place where the scientists try to push the boundaries when it comes to the depth of these convolutional neural networks. So deeper the convolutional neural network, more richer and versatile representations you can extract. But there comes a problem. The deeper the convolutional neural network or any neural network, the deeper layers become blind. The backpropagated gradient signal is not going there. So actually making the model sometimes even hurt the performance. So the researchers introduced two architectures. First was Inception, where they created these submodules or intermediate branches to inject this gradient signal into intermediate layers. So that is the Inception architecture. And then the true winner was ResNet architecture, which created a direct highway from input to the output using skip connections, so that the model can very easily understand and model the identity function. And then, so now if you are familiar with all these architectures, this might take some time, but if you are familiar with up until this point, then you can move forward when it comes to these more like more advanced convolutional neural network based architectures like UNet and fully convolutional networks, which are used for segmentation tasks. So here most of these architectures were trained to classify images, but here UNet and FCN are trained for segmentation, and so that is a dense dense classification task. You must identify and process every pixel. So try to understand this unit paper. It is extremely important, and we will find it again when it comes to diffusion models. And so that's it for convolutional neural networks. Next, there comes another very important domain. It is self-supervised learning. So up until this point, all these architectures were supervised learning methods. That means you need human annotated data samples. But human annotation is extremely expensive, inefficient, and cumbersome. So as a result, why not ask the model to create its own supervision signal? That is where self-supervised learning comes in. SimCLR architecture was the first self-supervised learning architecture. So there are two branches, a teacher branch and a student branch. And teacher branch is predicting, so we feed the model with two different augmented versions of the same data point, and both the teacher and the student must try to identify that these two augmented versions came from the same data point. So that is the simple idea of self-supervised learning, and especially SimCLR. But training SimCLR is extremely difficult. It becomes unstable very easily. So as a result, researchers introduced bootstrap your own latent. So now teacher is not learning directly from backpropagation. It is learning from the student itself. Teacher is a exponentially moving average of the student. And the next very interesting idea is that we make the architecture asymmetric. So now the teacher and the student are not equal. Next, you might be able to read this Barlow twins paper. So this is a very like a cornerstone paper when it comes to self-supervised learning, because it introduces this information bottleneck principle, where we must make our embeddings maximally informative about the data distribution and minimally informative about unrelated features like rotations or croppings or color augmentations. So that is the idea when it comes to Barlow twins. Next, so these are the first two steps. Let's move into the third step. Here you can see now you are familiar with self-supervised learning. We will extend this by reading this Dino architecture, understanding this Dino architecture. So Dino is using a concept called knowledge distillation, but knowledge distillation is similar to using a pre-trained fixed teacher and extracting a portion of its knowledge to a small network. But Dino, it is not using a separate teacher, it is using its own teacher, and teacher is also learning from the student, and this became extremely popular. Still, like even today we are using Dino's encoder as a backbone when it comes to processing images. And so then there's another very cute idea, this masked autoencoder. So what we are doing is we are masking a certain percentage of patches of an image and ask the model to predict them. So model must understand what is there in the image. So model is implicitly understanding, learning the data distribution itself. So this is a generative architecture. And so both generative architecture and this Dino and other architectures, we call them joint embedding architectures. Other than these two methods, there's a new and more efficient method called JEPA, or joint embedding predictive architecture. So if you can go through this IJEPA paper, you may understand it very clearly. And this small tree is the object detection part. So RCNN first introduced convolutional neural networks to detect objects in an image, and then it was extended using fast RCNN and faster RCNN. And today it is YOLO, you look only once paper which is dominating the object detection landscape. So go through them. It is a little bit easier when if you are familiar, if you have gone through the papers we discussed earlier. Then comes the attention paper. So attention is like most of the time this attention paper is introduced as a part of the sequence models courses, but I would suggest try to understand attention as a separate concept. So attention, try to read this attention is all you need paper. But attention paper, attention and transformers were first introduced for text, but text data is already sequential, but that is not the case when it comes to images. That is why we are introducing vision transformer, or the VIT. VIT patchifies the image, slices the image into patches, flattens them and projects them into embeddings using a linear projector and processes them. And to improve the efficiency of this vision transformer, pyramid transformer and the swing transformer was introduced. And now all this step 4 is more about like specific implementations of what we discussed up until now. So first you try it would be great if you can read this denoising diffusion probabilistic models paper, where we introduce the idea of diffusion models, and then you can move into stable diffusion. Flash attention is a way of utilizing GPU memory maximally to boost the performance of these transformer networks. And if you are familiar with these diffusion models, you can move into diffusion transformers. And here we discuss about this point net branch. So point clouds are being processed very much similar to these images, but the ideas are almost similar, but the way we implement them is slightly different. And you can first read the paper point net, then point net plus plus, where we improve the performance to detect point clouds with multiple granularities, and then we process the point clouds using the set operation of attention. And these two papers, these two ideas are more or less like implementation type, where we are using the knowledge we have gathered up until now to implement these ideas. So nerve and neural radiance fields and 3D Gaussian splattings are very interesting ideas. So you are trying to create novel views of a 3D structure, new views that you have not photographed using a small set of photos. And so we implement this using the architectures we discussed earlier, and this is going to be so. If you are interested in exploring this idea, I would suggest going through these papers. So one last advice I want to give you is, do not try to understand everything. It is not going to be easy, but you should have an abstract idea of each of these papers. Like, you must be able to explain each of these paper as using a single sentence. You must be able to very concisely, precisely explain these ideas. And if you are successful, then you can be confident. So good luck. After reading all these papers, the next natural step would be go ahead and read whatever the paper you like.